will talk today about regulations and compliance, which is like modern issues of engineering, and we meet several issues with this last year. I want to check if my screen is visible.
It is, yes. We're seeing the, yep, we're seeing your browser window, yep. And okay. Now we're seeing the slides, yep, all good.
Okay. The most issues we met is in China, because China is most strict now related to regulations, and they have like enough technologies to do that restrictions and control it. But we can see the same direction in other countries, so we think it's actual problem, and we need to deal with that somehow. I think this regulation problems will become very popular after several years, when other countries also will have that kind of AI technologies and that kind of resources to track the applications, track the internet. So at first I want to show how is current situation of simple applications. For example, if we have mobile, web, and maybe desktop application together, in high level explanation it will look like this. We can see there in each path there is one direction, like your mobile application reach to infrastructure, and it provides some data from backend or from your storage in cloud or in databases. So I want to start from compliance, which is started, I think, several years ago. The first was well known is GDPR. Later, the Apple provides his own, and now Google is providing the new rules for mobile applications. These all are well known now, and I think every company somehow can deal with these problems. For example, in some countries, you need to show pop-up before you start your application to show user what kind of data you use from user. In some websites, you need to show this pop-up, like accept cookies pop-up or something like that. And you know, from Apple side, it is more easier, because Apple do that restriction in OS level, and developers don't need to care about that as much as in Android platform or web platforms. So this all related mostly to users' data. So solutions here are to collect every sorry to collect all data in one place, and you need to have proper application without using any user data. This is all about sensitive data, like reading users personal information, reading users unique identifiers, or application list, or track user, or something like that. And you need to have for each of them some placeholder, and make sure your application can run properly without all of this data, because in some platforms you are it is required to run your application even when user will reject, for example, GDPR pop-up or accept cookies or something like that. Regulations are more complex, and they are not only about user sensitive data, but they are more about countries' regulations, governments' regulations. And the first point is user. Some countries will require to have user database like in that country, to not share user database, and some countries will require to provide user information or users activity information, and I will back to this part a little later. And another big part is content. The content, for example, in China, you need to moderate all content you have. And by saying content, we understand everything that user can generate, and also everything your application generates. Everything visible to other users can be content. And to this part also I will back a little later. I want to show how the simple architecture become very complicated when you're solving several issues related to regulations and compliance. You have this at first, this very simple and easy to maintain. Later, you see some issues related to compliance or regulations, and you create, for example, this is not new applications, but like you separate some part inside your application. For example, you have same application for iOS, but you have some checks where you separate the India part, or you have some checks to separate your Android Asia part. And this is also maintainable, but when you met the big issues, like you cannot separate anymore your iOS application because it becomes totally different from your main application. You need to create new one, and for Android you need new one, for website you need new one, for specific countries. And later you understand you have to create backend separate, you have to create database and cloud separated, and you have to create infrastructure separated. And this is become very complicated, and this is not maintainable anymore. For example, you provide new feature in your iOS application, later you need to pick that feature in your China version. You need to prepare your database related to that. You need to update everything from the main parts, and this structure will become more complicated each time you are solving some issue related to that. And let's check each part of that and see what kind of issues we have, and which points we need to we don't need to have some logic related to this part. I will go fast here. App identifier, for you cannot have logic here because later you can have several applications and the identifiers will be different. This one developers use mostly on security or safety part to check if application is original or not. Your backend URL also can be changed for different countries, because even your domain can be blocked in some country. You need to provide new domain, or by some countries rules you need to have domain registered in that country, and that means you need to have some manageability to change your domain like runtime. All content related functional must be independent, because in some country maybe you will require to close everything related to content. Another big issue is third-party libraries, because we don't have any control to that libraries, but that libraries can have issues with regulations or with compliance, and you need to have placeholders for each of them that you can change for for some version you can change the library with another one. Sensitive data, you need you need to run your application, as I mentioned, without using any sensitive data in proper way. From database or cloud side, you need to separate again content from your from your storage to make sure you can have, for example, some regions content separated and stored in that region. And you need to have possibility to split your storage. For example, same data keep in different places. From backend side, you need to have content labeling mechanism. I will back to this at the end. And you need to split all your content related functionality from your core functionality, that you can run your backend without content, for example. And you need to have manageability to choose which storage to use from your backend. Also, you need to have manageability to store your users and read your users, keep your user in that region to storage related to that region. Infrastructure, I think, most important part in here, and sometimes when you meet like issues which need to quick solutions, you can solve it by infrastructure, by switching your domains, by switching your domain runtime, and change like whole backend or whole storage if you met some issue which requires fast solutions. And how the ideal world will look like if you need to solve these problems. You need to have, I understand that this is not doable for each company, but let's check this version. You need to have several versions of your each application, of your each part of your infrastructure and database. And then you need to combine your application by Lego structure. For example, you pick version 1 from Android, version 4 for iOS, and you connect this all together and create one application for one region. This is not fixed, and this must be like something like settings file, which you can change whenever you want, and you can create application with this Lego structure for every country you want, or you can have like one global application and create another applications where you met some issues. Also, each part of this Lego are modular, and for example, this is the iOS structure. You need to have separated each part, and with same logic, you need to create application in each application with like this. You pick a social network from somewhere, you pick core functionality, registration, payment, and other parts, and create one iOS application. And somewhere you will not need to create social network. You will create like these 3 parts and will provide to Asia. What is, sorry, pros and cons of this version? This design looks very beautiful, and it is very flexible. You can like create several types of your same application. You can provide application which you want, and you can apply all regulations and compliance in each country, and it's easy to maintain because when each of your application are modular, when your whole design are modular, you can change everything like separately, and it will not affect to other parts. But most biggest problem of this, it will be very expensive, and not all companies can do this. It requires big resources, big time to develop, and continuous maintenance. It is easy to maintain, but you need to do that maintenance long time. Every time you provide new features somewhere, you need to update all your applications, and because you have too many parts in each version, you need to do like a lot of updates for each of them. And what is the like more cheaper solution for this? The first of all, you need to deal with content. What is content? Let's define. Everything generated by user is content. It can be photo, text, and each text, even name or username, comment, description, tags, and also text on photos or videos are content. Video, audio, and the same fields generated by your application or auto-generated are also content. Another part you need to deal is user. You need, for example, some countries require to keep your user database in their country, and they will not allow you to share your their users' data to other countries. Some countries will require to provide user information when they want, provide users activity when they want. Also, users' data is very sensitive, and you need to be careful here. If you, for example, you cannot block some user because of other countries' regulations. You can block that user in that country, but you are not allowed to block him globally. So you need to have separate databases for user. You need to check from where your user is coming, and store him in right way. And next is content. Content is most hard part to deal with in regulations scope. And here is the solution, like which can be cheaper compared the Lego structure or modular architecture. How to do each content which we defined before is content object, and each content must have label. Label must provide information about contents visibility area or contents invisible area. Like there can be some array of countries, there can be some marks which shows this is available in Asia but not available in US, or this is available in Russia but not in India. And this label must be in each content, like comment must have label, username must have label, photos must have label. And every time you read content that you need to show to your user, you need to filter it by label. The filtering can be done by AI, or if you have set up the label, it even can be done without AI. But here, when you create some content, you need to pass it through moderation and label it. This part is most hard part, complicated part in here. This can be done by AI, but for example, for China, you cannot use only AI. because AI cannot filter everything. They will check, like, even if there is some small text in photo, you need to filter it. In some regions you will need manual moderation for this and manual labeling of this, but in most cases AI can cover, because because we all big, like, platforms already use AI to filter, like, mature content or violence content. This is a little bit different, and because for example, mature content can be filtered for all places, like, in one way, but for China or for Russia, you need to have a different type of filtering mechanism to understand the regulations, which can understand the regulations and find the issues related to that country. You need also to have a lot of information about the regulation, what is restricted, and in each country you can find some platform which provides AI technology related to the regulations. But even that technologies, that companies will not guarantee you that they can filter everything, and sometimes you need to add manual moderation part in here. The most expensive part of this solution is passing your all content, existing content, through this filtering mechanism. Why this most expensive? Because this issue met not I don't think the, like, small startups will meet these issues. Countries will not focus on that. Countries will focus on big companies which have, like, big data, which have big count of users. And when you have, like, million or 100 million of users, and you need to filter all your existing content, it will be very big. But benefit here is that you will pass that existing content only once through this moderation, and later every time when you create something, it will go through moderation. It is not so expensive. Only one time you need to spend time and money to pass your existing content through this regulation. Compared with first part, like Lego structure, this solution is very cheap. This is very easy to maintain and easy to implement. Implementation can be done very fast. You need to just separate your content part, add their label, and later you need to pass all your existing data through this moderation. And for all next creations, you will pass again to moderation, and that's all. You don't need to do some big architectural changes, big design changes. The problems here, as I mentioned, is biggest one is existing data, which will be a little bit expensive, or in some cases it will be very expensive. Depends on size of your data and depends on what kind of technologies you can use to cover the data. Another part is moderation, because I mentioned in some countries you cannot use only AI technology. You need to have manual moderation team also, which can be also a little bit expensive, not so much, but it's also a resource. And I want to mention that this kind of solutions already used by big companies, but what is different now, every company which grows, they are going to global. They are they want to show different data to their users in different countries. We call it localization. They deal with this problem, but the biggest difference is localization is not required, and a company can decide, do they need localization or not? Do they need to show different content in Brazil and different content in USA? And for that, if like you miss some content, you show wrong content in Brazil, you show wrong content in the US, nothing will happen. You can lose some users, you can have bad feedbacks, but you will not be blocked by Brazil or by US. So it is your decision to make your application localized or not, but with regulations, it is not your decision. It is that country rules, and you need to follow that. Why this is big issue, and now only big companies made this only in China, because China have big AI technologies. They have very well known the Great Firewall, which can block everything they want. And other countries, I think, still don't have. I mean, countries who want to have this kind of regulations, they still don't have enough resources and technologies, and when they will have it, they will do this that kind of rules in their countries. And if now a lot of companies are blocked in China, later maybe it will affect also in Russia, in India, in Brazil, where we see also some small regulations, not as big as in China, but they have some small rules and you need to follow them. I think that's all. I'll be happy to answer to questions.
Thank you very much for that. That was really interesting. There are some questions that have come in. So one is, and you may have answered this earlier, but perhaps we could talk about it a little bit more. But Sam Shaheen is asking, what is sensitive data?
Sensitive data is everything related to users, user name, users email, users files in devices, users personal information, users activity, everything related to user, I think, is sensitive.
And obviously there's probably some core pieces of data that is sensitive everywhere in the world, but also there'd be localized context to apply.
Not everywhere. Like GDPR is working for Europe countries, but for example, Apple's IDFI is working everywhere. It is OS provided solutions. I think each country have their own rules, but in most cases they are like very close to each other. For example, in China, you need to show privacy policy pop-up before any interaction in your application, and when user not accepted it, even if user not accepted it, you need to run your application in proper way, and you cannot use any data from users, like even any unique identifier to identify user.
Yep, understood. Yeah, I like the bit at the beginning of the presentation is effectively a sort of a regulatory or compliance architecture. So, an architecture that can be used as a reference model within an application, which is a great idea. So, just sort of how you structure all of those, the myriad of concerns that you have from different geographies. So that was great. There's a question that was asked. How do you keep aware of all of the sort of coming changes within a regulatory landscape. So, and of course, if you're dealing with an app that's used globally, you've got all of these jurisdictions with their different proposed changes. So organisationally, how do you see that being handled?
This part what I mentioned. The Lego structure is very good solution for that, but this looks very expensive, and I don't think everyone can use this structure. But the last part, labeling mechanism, is more cheaper. I think everyone can use it. And the question how to deal with this is very hard to answer, because if we check the China, we can see that there is no any big global company can deal with that, and there is at this moment I don't know any company which is working in China from global, like social related part. I mean.
Right. Okay. Yep. And I suppose that sort of begs the question then: is there a size limit for an organisation before this needs to be a consideration, or perhaps part of the organisational structure? Where do you see that sort of line being drawn?
It's very important part, but there is no exact numbers of size limits when you will need to deal with this. But I think when you are big enough that countries will focus on you, you need to deal with this. It can be like 10 million users or maybe less than 10, and they will check you.
Yeah. I suppose how should startups that are looking to launch an app that might be used globally, how should they think about this? Is it something they can park for the future, or should it be baked in at the beginning of the effort?
Of course, it's better to be prepared from the start, but from the beginning. But from in startups cases, I don't think they will put enough resources to deal with this in the beginning. Any cases, this will require resources. I don't think startups will have that to prepare their infrastructure, to have like different storages in different countries. I don't think it's possible from beginning.
Yeah, it doesn't look like the sort of thing that would make the first version of your app, is it? Not in the MVP scope. Yeah. So no, I guess that sort of leads on to another question that we've got, which is if you've got a large-scaled organisation, so you do have millions of users, what do you feel is an acceptable error or miss rate in this regard? Is it absolute 100% compliance, or do organisations tend to set some tolerance around it, given the amount of volume that they have to process?
It depends on country, I think. If we check also the China, you need to 100% compliance. If in other countries, maybe not 100%, maybe they will check your application like yearly or twice a year. But in China, they can check it like every month. They can check it every week, and you need to be 100% prepared for that. But in other countries, I think no, you can have some mistakes. It will not be so dangerous. You can like fix in long period.
Yeah, so I imagine the consequences to the organisation varies depending on where you are in the world as well. Because loss of a few users might be bad, but being no longer able to operate at all, obviously, or significant financial consequences could be much, much worse. So have you seen much of variation in that regard around the
world? Sorry, I didn't get the last part of question.
So it's about the consequence of non-compliance. I was saying that losing a few users isn't too bad, but being hit with a $10 million fine or being asked to stop operating entirely are very different scale consequences. So what sort of variation have you seen?
It's you need to provide very quick solutions in that cases when you got notice that you are going to be blocked or you got some warnings. You need to have, for example, if you check the Lego structure, it's very easy in this case. You can like separate your content, your social network, and provide new application without social network, which will provide all your core functionality. And you can continue interacting in that country before you will solve your social network part. But in that kind of cases, you need proactive solutions and maybe maybe changing domain, maybe changing application in case when you are blocked can solve problem for short time before you will solve all problems.
Mm. Yeah, it's interesting. In the cybersecurity space, when you're talking about things like data breaches, a number of countries around the world have implemented mandatory reporting. Is there a similar situation in regard to sort of compliance around privacy and such? Is there an expectation that you report regularly how you're going in that regard, or is it more sort of external audit based?
It is more regularly, I think. You will be checked regularly, I think. If we check also the China case, in big companies, the government will check your work even inside your office, inside your company. They will do moderation like with you. They will check all your content with you.
Yeah. And does it get down to coding practices, or is it just strictly looking at content?
Not coding practices, but they can run some automation tests on your applications to check. They will not. I don't think they will check your code, but they can run some tests which will check what your code does.
Right, and potentially as a consequence, the architecture that you're using. So
Yeah.
Hassan's just sent in another question. Can regulations conflict with each other now or in the future? For example, a user in Europe connecting to a service in China, which data regulations apply?
Yeah, they can conflict. I think even now they can conflict for different countries. As an example, if there is user who posts some picture which is not from Europe, but the picture is not allowed in China, you cannot show that picture in China. But also you cannot block that user because he is Europe user. He is not from China. You don't have like reason to block that user. But his content is not acceptable for China.
It sounds like a lot of effort to manage those situations. Do you find that happening a lot in your organization?
It's happening because we are interacting in our application live in China. And yes, it's very hard to solve these kind of issues. And that's why you need to have solutions for each country, for each regulations.
And that's implemented from a user experience perspective. So the content still exists shared by that user in Europe, but somebody in China cannot see it. Yeah.
Yes, sometimes you will lose user experience, but to accept regulations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. And just a little bit more, if you can, on the use of AI. So you talked a little bit about using it to manage content. What are some of the challenges that you see when trying to use AI, given the volumes that are involved?
Not big challenges to use the AI. The most problematic cases are that in some cases AI, of course, cannot detect everything. It is not like human, and in some cases you need to double check with manual moderation. But like 80% cases can be covered by AI.
Yeah, it's certainly going to trim down the effort required, but as you say, eventually you might end up with a human in the loop somewhere.
Sorry.
They're saying 80% is great, but I suppose there are circumstances where it comes down to a human being trying to check content and given the sorts of volumes. Yeah.
You need also to pass that moderation manually by moderation team to cover like the 20%, or you need to pass everything again with by moderation team because you cannot trust to AI fully.
And do you have something like that at your organization? What sort of size team are we talking
about? I didn't get question.
Sorry, yeah, just the manual moderation of content. Do you have that type of team in your organization, and what sort of size are we talking about in terms of number of people?
Yeah. At this moment, we don't do the manual moderation for China, but we have moderation team which is covering the global application. For China, at this moment, we don't have social part, but the size of moderation like depends on your moderation team, depends on your company, can be like 20 people, and now it's also popular to provide moderation to, there is companies who do only moderation, and you can use the services to pass your application like by moderation. I mean, you don't need to have big moderation team inside your company. You can use third-party services.
Right. Okay, no, that's good. And just as an aside then, if you're using a third party to moderate content, do you need to put that into your the conditions, terms and conditions that you sign up for, that you're sharing data with other parties?
You will not share data, but you will provide some platform that you can only check or uncheck like content, but you will not share your data with them.
Right. Right. Well, that's the end of the list of questions that we have from the audience. So I just wanted to say thank you very much for your time today. That was great, and it really does sort of, I think, bring up a subject that gets a little glossed over in organisations. People don't pay enough attention to it. I think it seems to be a secondary thought when people are building applications. So, any final comments you have for the audience before we end the session?
Thank you too for this organization. It's a big honor to me to be a speaker in this event with this great list of speakers. Thank you.
All right, no worries. Thank you, Hank. I really appreciate you spending some time with us today and teaching us a little bit about regulations and compliance. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.